Splatterina Crimson Canvas, Part 2, The Mythical Hunt. The Abyssal Crags, a Slaughterhouse Symphony. The Abyssal Crags were a festering scar on the Palpicus Islands, a labyrinth of jagged obsidian spires, bubbling tar pits, and air so thick with sulphur it burned the lungs like acid. The ground pulsed with the screams of buried pal souls, their faint glows seeping through cracks like blood through a wound. Splatterina stood atop of a blackened ridge, her blood-red hair writhing in a nest of serpents in the scalding wind, her black dress plastered to her skin with layers of crusted gore, and her grey earrings glinted like surgical scalpels, catching the violet flash that tore across the sky, a pulsating unnatural beacon that signalled the presence of her ultimate prey. Her giant razor blade, its edge sharper than a guillotine's kiss, hummed in her hands, vibrating with anticipation, as if it could taste the blood to come. Splatterina's lips curled into a smile that was half snarl, half ecstasy, and her eyes were glowing with the madness of 1,000 harvested souls. And this was no ordinary pal. The violet flash heralded the ebon wrath Leviathan, a mythical abomination that made the island's fiercest pals look like lambs. Towering as high as a cathedral, its body was a grotesque tapestry of obsidian scales that oozed black ichor, writhing tentacles tipped with venomous barbs that pulsed with violet light, and a maw like a cavern, lined with teeth that wept corrosive bile. Its 6 eyes burned with the fury of a dying star, each pupil a swirling vortex of tormented souls, and its bat-like wings, spanning wider than a village, were veined with molten cracks that dripped lava. Its passive ability, Void Shriek Cataclysm, unleashed sonic wails that just didn't shatter stone, they liquefied flesh, boiled blood, and turned bones to ash, leaving craters filled with bubbling, screaming sludge. Splatterina's heart bounded, not with fear but with lust. This creature was her canvas, its flesh destined to be her ultimate Frankenstein mount, a monstrosity so vile it would make the gods vomit blood. Her servants, Razor Fluff, Frostcore, Petal Ripper, and Gore Chimp, fanned out across the crags, their metal detectors buzzing like swarms of enraged hornets, the devices, jury-rigged with soul-infused wires, vibrated violently when they were near buried pals, their needles twitching like legs of dying spiders. Razor Fluff's detectors screamed, and their creature tore into the earth, its bleed-wool frenzy triggering when a wild rush or charged. Its wool exploded outward in a storm of razor-sharp shards, slicing the boar into a pulpy stew of flesh and bone, and blood sprang in arcs that painted the obsidian red. Chunks of meat splattered Splatterina's face, and she licked them clean, giggling like a child in a candy store. "Oh, you're a messy little artist, aren't you?" she cooed, stroking Razor Fluff's jagged fleece. Frostcore slithered forward, its cryo-shatter scream erupting in a shockwave of ice shards that impaled a pack of direhowls. Their bodies froze mid-scream and then shattered into crimson icicles that rained down like daggers, embedding in the ground with wet thunks. One shard pierced a direhowl's skull, and its brain oozing out like pink jelly, steaming in the cold air. Petal Reaper's necroflora bloom turned to a patch of earth, into a rotting quagmire, the ground bubbling as toxic spores dissolve rock into a fleshy soup. Buried soul surface, glowing orbs that wailed like banshees as Splatterina snatched them, crushing them in her fists. Her hair flared brighter, her body trembling as their power coursed through her, veins pulsing under her skin like black worms. Gorchim, frenzied by blood-swing mania, hacked a gobvin into chunks, its bone machetes carving through flesh with a sound like tearing wet leather. A soul orb rolled free, and Splatterina seized it, her laughter a jagged symphony that echoed through the crags. But Splatterina wasn't here for small fry. She waded into a herd of alpacas, her razor blade a conductor's baton in a symphony of slaughter. Legs first, she sang, slicing through a alpaca's limbs, blood gushing like a fountain, painting her dress in fresh crimson. The creature bleated, and its eyes wide with terror as she carved its torso and organs spilling in a steaming pile, intestines slithering like snakes. Torso next, she cackled, her blade hacking through ribs and bone fragments flying like shrapnel. Head last. A final swing sent the head tumbling, its tongue lolling as it bounced into a tar pit, sizzling like bacon. The other alpacas scattered, but Splatterina was a whirlwind, and her blade was slashing through wool and flesh, leaving a trail of dismembered corpses that twitched in pools of gore. "This is art," she screamed, kicking a severed leg into the air where it exploded into a mist of blood. She didn't harvest these pals. This was butchery for the sheer unhinged joy of it. A prelude to the Leviathan's demise. The PAL scanner on her wrist, looted from a tamer's mangled corpse, screeched like a dying animal. Its screen flashing with the ebon rat Leviathan signal. Splatterina's eyes locked onto a shadow moving across the crags, its wings blotting out the violet sky, its tentacles writhing like a living storm. The ground quaked as the Leviathan landed, its void shriek cataclysm unleashing a wail that split the earth, sending boulders tumbling and tar pits erupting in guises of molten sludge. Splatterina's servants staggered, blood trickling from their ears. But she stood firm, and her razor blade humming with soul-fueled power. "You're mine, darling," she purred, her voice dripping with venomous lust. "Let's paint the crags red." The battle, a gore-soaked apocalypse. The Ebon-Wrath Leviathan was a god of destruction, its obsidian scales glinting like wet tar, its tentacles lashing with barbs that were dripped in venom so potent it melted stone into hissing puddles, and its 6 eyes glowed with violet malice, each pupil a vortex of screaming souls, and its maw wide open, teeth weeping bile, burning the ground into craters of bubbling ichor. And Splatterina's servants charged, and their passives igniting the crags in a maelstrom of unhinged chaos. Razorfluff leaped first, its bleed-wooled frenzy erupting in a blizzard of razor-sharp wool that slashed Leviathan's tentacles. Black ichor sprayed like oil, splattering Razorfluff's fleece and burning holes through its body. The creature screamed, and its wool exploding again, shredding its own flesh, and with suicidal frenzy, chunks of meat flying like shrapnel. Splatterina laughed, dodging a tentacle that pulverized a boulder into absolute dust. "Cut deeper, my pet," she shrieked, her blade slicing a alpaca straggler that wandered too close, and its blood mixing with the Leviathan's ichor in a grotesque cocktail. Frostgore slithered forward, its cryo-shatter scream unleashing a shockwave of ice shards that pierced the Leviathan's underbelly. Ichor froze mid-air, forming jagged stalactites that shattered into daggers, and one impaling Frostgore's tail, pinning it to the ground. The serpent roared, and its scream freezing the tar pits into jagged arena. But the Leviathan's void shriek cataclysm hit back, its wail liquefying a patch of ice into a steaming pool of flesh and bone. Frostgore's body began to melt, its scales sloughing off like wet paper. But it kept screaming, ice shards flying like a hailstorm, one slicing through Splatterina's arm, drawing a spray of her own blood. She licked the wound, her eyes wild. "Pain is just foreplay," she cackled, hacking at the tentacle, ichor splashing her face like acid rain. Petal Reaper's necroflora bloom filled the air with toxic spores, a green-black cloud that corroded the Leviathan's scales until they oozed like melted wax, dripping in globs that burned the ground into hissing craters. The spores ate into one of the Leviathan's eyes, the orb bursting in a spray of violet jelly that screamed as it splattered. But the creature's wings beat, dispersing the spores in a gust that knocked Petal Reaper into the tar pit. Its petals wilted, burning as the tar consumed it, but the spores kept spreading, rotting the Leviathan's flesh into a bubbling, fleshy soup. Splatterina inhaled the stench of laughter, a jagged blade. "Rot for me, my sweet," she screamed, carving through the tentacle, its venom sizzling on her blade, melting the edge slightly. Gorechimp, lost in the blood-swing mania, was a whirlwind of bone machetes, hacking at the Leviathan's flank. It severed a tentacle, ichor gushing in a torrent that downed a nearby direhowl, its body dissolving into a pink slurry. The Leviathan's venom burned Gorechimp's arms, the flesh peeling away to reveal bone, but the monkey's frenzy only grew, its machetes carving through scales and muscle, chunks of flesh flying like confetti. One swing went wild, nearly decapitating Razorfluff, whose wool exploded in retaliation, shredding Gorechimp's leg into ribbons. Splatterina clapped, delighted by the chaos. Yes, tear each other apart," she howled, her blade slashing the Leviathan's wing, tearing a gash that sprayed ichor like a fire hose, soaking her dress until it clung to her like a second skin. The Leviathan's void shriek cataclysm hit again, a wail so powerful that it collapsed a cliff. Boulders crashing like meteors, one crushed Petal Reaper's hindquarters, its spores erupting in a final desperate cloud that rotted the Leviathan's second eye into a steaming puddle. Splatterina climbed the beast, her boots slipping in ichor, her razor blade hacking through the scales with wet schlicks. "Legs first," she chanted, severing a massive limb, muscle and bone parting like rotten fruit, the stump gushing ichor that burned her skin. "Wings next!" She slashed its wing, tearing through membrane and bone, the appendage flapping uselessly as it fell, crushing Frostgore's tail. The serpent's scream froze the ichor into a grotesque sculpture. Shards piercing Splatterina's leg, she laughed through the pain, her hair glowing as she absorbed soul fragments unearthed by the chaos, her body pulsing with stolen power. Her servants were breaking. Razorfluff's wool was matted with its own blood. Frostgore's body half melted. Petal Reaper's petals burned to ash. Gorechimp's arms reduced to bleeding stumps, but they fought on, driven by her will. Splatterina reached the Leviathan's head, dodging a tentacle that pulverized a spire into dust. Head last, she screamed, driving her razor blade into its skull, and the blade sank deep, bone cracking like thunder, ichor and brain matter sprang like a fountain that painted her from red from head to toe. The Leviathan's scream shook the crags, its body convulsing as she carved through its skull, hacking until the head tore free, rolling across the ground in a trail of violet blood. Its 6 eyes flickered and dimmed, the soul orb rising in a massive pulsating sphere that wailed with the agony of 1,000 pals. Splatterina seized the orb, her body trembling as its power surged through her. Her hair blazed like a crimson supernova, and her eyes glowing like twin furnaces, her laughter a cacophony that split the sky, and the crags were a slaughterhouse littered with blood, ice, spores and bones, and her servants barely standing, their bodies mangled but alive. She stood atop of the Leviathan's corpse, her razor blade dripping in her dress, a tapestry of gore. "You are my masterpiece," she whispered, stroking the severed head, its teeth still weeping bile. The Soul Harvest, a carnival of carnage. The battle was won, but Splatterina's hunger was insatiable. The crags were rich with buried souls, and her servants with metal detectors buzzing like a chorus of damned souls, and she ordered them to dig, their passives turning the wasteland into a nightmare. Razorfluff's wool shredded the earth, unearthing a cluster of orbs that screamed as they surfaced, their glow illuminating the blood-soaked ground. Frostcore's eyes cracked open a crevice, revealing a cache of souls that wailed like a choir of the dead, their light burning Splatterina's skin as she crushed them in her fists. Petal Reaper spores corroded a boulder, exposing a soul so ancient that it pulsed with black light, its screams rattling her bones, and Gore Chimp hacked wildly, unearthing orbs with every swing, its machetes carving through dirt and bone, one swing splitting a buried pal skeleton into dust. Each soul amplified Splatterina's power, and her body glowing with violet veins, her razor blade humming louder, its edge sharpening with every orb she absorbed. She danced through the cracks, her blade slashing stray pals. A pengullet's head rolled, its beak still snapping. A Tiefen's trunk was severed, spraying water like a burst pipe. A rib bunny's ears were sliced, twitching as they bled out. The ground was a swamp of blood and ichor, bodies piling like a grotesque sculpture. Splatterina laughed, her voice a razor's edge, as she bathed in the carnage, her dress so soaked it dripped like a leaking wound. Her servants were relentless, and their detectors leading them to a hidden crypt beneath the crags, its entrance sealed with obsidian. Frostcore's dry shatter scream shattered the stone, revealing a chamber filled with hundreds of soul orbs, their light so intense that it burned the air. Splatterina plunged into the crypt, her hands scooping up the orbs like a child in a candy store, each one screaming as she crushed it, her body convulsing with power, her hair whipped like a storm, and her earrings glinting as she absorbed enough souls to rival a god. "More!" she screamed, her voice shaking the crypt, dust and bones raining down. "I need everything." The ultimate mount, a Frankenstein apocalypse. Splatterina dragged the ebon wrath Leviathan's corpse to her lair, a Herculean task that left a trail of ichor and flesh through the cracks. The body barely fit on her surgery table, its tentacles spilling over the edges, its severed head leaking bile that burnt the stone floor, and she worked with manic intensity, her black thread stitching flesh with unholy precision, her hands slick with blood and ichor. She fused the Leviathan with parts from her earlier victims, a jet dragon's aurora wings pulsing with spectral light, a frostallion's icy hooves dripping with frozen venom, a blaze-howl fiery mane blazing with violet flames, a chillette serpentine tail writhing with barbs, and a dinosam's acidic petals oozing corrosive sap. She crushed the Leviathan's soul orb, its screaming harmonizing with 100 others from her collection, the runes on the table flaring with crimson and violet light, the air crackling with the stench of burning flesh. The result was a necro-void behemoth, a mount that was less creature and more apocalypse. Its obsidian scales pulsed with violet veins that wept ichor. Its tentacles writhed with barbs that dripped molten venom. And its wings shimmered with icy fire that burned hotter than hell. Its maw lined with teeth like guillotines spewed bile that dissolved stone into hissing sludge. Its eyes, 6 glowing orbs stolen from the Leviathan, swirled with the souls that screamed eternally. Its passives were a grotesque hymn to destruction. Cataclysmic gore wail, when struck, it unleashed a sonic stream that liquefied flesh, boiled blood and shattered bones, turning enemies into steaming puddles of gore that screamed as they dissolved. Soul flare tempest, its wings summoned a vortex of stolen souls, shredding pals with spectral blades that burned with violet fire, leaving behind husks that twitched with ghostly agony. Ichor blaze eruption, its mane erupted in beams of corrosive flame, melting flesh and stone into glowing, oozing scars that pulsed with trapped souls, weeping blood for days. Venom Reaver pulse. Its tentacles pulse with venom, like corroded mines, driving enemies into a frenzied self-destruction, tearing their own flesh apart in madness-fueled orgy of gore. Abyssal hemorrhage. Its scales wept ichor that formed pools of sentient blood, lashing out with tendrils that dragged pals into their depths, drowning them in liquid agony. Splatterina mounted necro-void behemoth, her razor blade raised like a tyrant's scepter, her dress a crimson shroud dripping with ichor. The mount roared, its cataclysmic gore wail collapsing the lair's ceiling, stalactites crashing like bombs, one impaling Gorchim's shoulder, its blood-swing mania triggering a final frenzied hack that carved a stalactite into dust. Razor fluffs will exploded, shredding the walls. Frostgore's ice froze the debris. Pale Reaper spores rotted the air. Splatterina's laughter was a storm, her hair a blazing comet as the behemoth took flight. Its soul flare tempest tearing through the cavern, leaving a trail of spectral blades that screamed like the damned. The crags burned as they soared, and the behemoth ichor blaze eruption melting the spires into glowing slag. Its Venom Reaver pulse, driving wild pals to rip their own flesh apart. Their screams, a chorus to Splatterina's glory. And she leaned forward, whispering to her mount, "You are my masterpiece, my apocalypse." The behemoth's eyes glowed brighter, its tentacles lashing and its maw dripping bile that burned the ground below into a hissing crater. The Crimson Rain, a world of gore. The Palpagus Islands became Splatterina's slaughterhouse. Necrovoid behemoth soared across the sky, its passive leaving trails of melted stone and liquefied corpses and screaming blood pools, and her servants scoured the land with their metal detectors, unearthing souls to fuel her endless hunger. Razorfluff shredded jungles, its wool carving trees into splinters. Blood and sap mixing in grotesque stews. Frostgore froze rivers, its eye shards impaling pals mid-flight and their bodies shattering into crimson snow. Petal reaper spores rotted the entire forest, turning them into quagmires of flesh and bone, souls rising like fireflies to be crushed in Splatterina's fists. Gorgim hacked mountains into rubble, its machetes carving through stone and pal alike, leaving trails of severed limbs and twitching corpses. The violet flash appeared less often, as if the mythical creature had fled to other realms, terrified of Splatterina's wrath, but she didn't care. Her canvas was the islands, her paint, the blood of pals, her brush, the razor blade that never dulled. She rode Necrovoid Behemoth through a crimson dawn, her hair a blazing inferno, her earrings glinting like stars in a blood-red sky. Pals fell before her, and their bodies dismembered in her meticulous order, and their souls harvested to fuel her godlike power. In a coastal village she descended, the behemoth's abyssal hemorrhage flooding the streets with sentient blood that dragged tamers and pals into its depths. Their screams bubbling as they drowned. A tamer raised a pal sphere, but Splatterina's blade cleaved through its arm, the limb twitching as it fell, the sphere rolling into a pool of ichor. "No cages for me," she hissed, her blade splitting his skull, brains splattering like oatmeal. The behemoth's cataclysmic gore wail liquefied the village. Buildings collapsing into sludge, survivors melting into screaming puddles. Splatterina stood atop of a pile of corpses, her mount's tentacles coiling around her like a lover's embrace. "This is my world," she whispered, her voice a razor's edge, "and I'll carve it until it bleeds forever." And she raised her blade to the islands, trembling as the behemoth roared, its soul-flare tempest tearing the sky apart, soul screaming in its wake. Epilogue. The Eternal Butcher. Splatterina's reign was absolute. The Palworld Islands is a gallery of gore where every jungle, mountain and beach was a canvas for her art. Necrovoid Behemoth was her chariot, its passives a hymn to destruction that echoed across the world. Her servants battered, but unyielding, continued their soul hunt, their detectors buzzing like the heartbeat of the damned. She dreamed of new mounts and new abominations, each more horrific than the last. The violet flash was gone, but Splatterina knew more creatures hid in the shadows, waiting to be carved. She rode through a blood-red dusk, her razor blade dripping with a freshly butchered pal, her hair glowing with stolen souls. "More," she whispered, her eyes burning with madness. "More flesh, more blood, more chaos." The islands were hers, and she would paint them crimson until the stars bled.